It's really my pleasure to introduce you to Lily, our speaker of tonight. Lily Graff is the founder of IMMA Collective and an impact driven service design consultant. As the founder of IMMA Collective, Lily supports freelancers and independent professionals in growing sustainable, life supporting practice, not just profitable ventures. Alongside that, she consults with impact driven organizations to strengthen their adaptive capacities in times of compounding change, offering strategic design, facilitation, and resilience building expertise. Her work spans topics like climate adaptation and personal and financial resilience. Prior to founding IMA, Lily worked in service design roles as TechFix, Projects by IF, LiveWork Studio, and Experiencer. Before her transition to service design, Lily worked on project and innovation management roles. Lily has a resume that is very full, but there is one thing that I'd like to mention too, which is that Lily also taught design research at SUPSI, University of Applied Science and Arts of Southern Switzerland, and has served as a visiting professor at Politecnico di Milano. So it's really my pleasure to welcome on the stage this wonderful expert and lovely human who is Lily. Welcome to the stage, Lily.
Hi, Daniele. Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. As this is a lightning talk event, I will leave the stage directly to you.
Yeah, thank you. So, to everybody who was listening, now you heard a list of things that I was doing, but if I would boil it down in my career, you can apply service design essentially to two things, either creating new things from scratch or improving existing things. And as service designers, we often do this by also changing the way of how organizations work. And in my career as a service designer in different agencies, I really loved working on designing things from scratch. And creating something new when it has never existed before has some particular obstacles and things that happen. And so I thought I share three lessons that I learned across those 10 years of designing new value propositions and offerings for governments, big organizations, startups, but also like now solopreneurs, so people who just run one single, like a one person business. And one of the things that has been like a hard lesson for me to learn when we learn service design at university or anybody else, I think many of you are familiar with the double diamond as a process. So if you're not familiar, essentially the double diamond now has two phases in the design process. First, it's about figuring out what is the right thing to design and then designing the thing right. And so, what I learned along the way is ideally, you have the time to go through the entire process. And often, when you work in bigger organizations or organizations that are already familiar with design, they know what it is, you can go through it, it's relatively easy. But when I moved from London to Italy, or also into the startup world, and I found myself working in organizations that were like, what service design, what is that you do? I want to design a new service offering, a new value proposition, a new venture. Can you help me do that? One of the things that I discovered and learned and how to apply is really mixing and combining the double diamond in one thing. What do I very concretely by that? Whenever you come into organizations, they really have a hard time knowing or understanding that they know they want to focus on the problem. Usually decision makers already have a solution in mind. We just love having an idea and wanting to test or build the idea. And often decision makers think that if we build it, people will come and buy it. But that's not the case, as you might know. And so one of the elements that I learned how to do is when we do user research, really combining exploratory research, discovery research, with testing of early concepts and prototypes of ideas that your decision makers might have with the stakeholders. For example, when I was asked for a big fintech company to design a new value proposition around financial well-being, yes, we asked the first half an hour of the interview or 40 minutes about anything around financial well-being, what finances mean, how they manage money, what are their struggles. And then in the last 20 minutes, we showed some early concepts in different direction to get a sense of what people liked or disliked. And this had the benefit of, one, for us getting really the deep insights that you need to create something truly valuable and to go into the kind of unmet needs territory. And at the same time, it also was giving the satisfaction to decision makers to test their ideas and see what worked and what flopped. And this was a really clever way, and that I still bring along. So not doing first like a whole review and round exploratory research and then testing, but actually combining the two things in one. And I still do this to this day, even with my entrepreneurs that I help. In this case, it's often like a one-page idea of an offering. And so first asking people what are their problems, and then figuring out, is this solution potentially viable or does it make sense? And so this might be one concrete tip that you can take away. And I want to share and also write any questions that you have or curiosities around this in the chat, because we're happy to answer them. The second tip is really, once you have those conversations, and this is specific when you design new things from scratch. Because when you have an existing service that you try to improve, you already have a business model that works. It's a service that brings in money. It exists because it is viable. But when you design something from scratch, you don't know if it's actually viable, if it brings in enough revenue, income that it justifies building it. And when we design new services from scratch, it really is combining service design and business design. And so having those skills is essential. And when it comes specifically to figuring out what you should solve or what it is that you should design, I like to introduce you to the concept of painkiller problems and vitamin problems. Why and what do I mean by that? One tendency that we have as service designers is that we are incredibly curious. We often have a very holistic perspective about the service end to end, the front end and the back end. And we really like to look at all the details that would make a great experience or that would work well. But when it comes to designing a first value proposition, we really need to focus on something that would work really well, and that is a painkiller problem. And a painkiller problem is something like headache, something that really is painful for the customer right here and right now, and that they would give them a sense of urgency to leave the home right now and find the next pharmacy to get something, or to lie down, or take a break, or go for a walk. So they have the urgency to take action. Vitamin problems are, on the other hand, a little bit like, yes, you have a vitamin deficiency, but you might not notice any kind of relevant symptoms right away. On the long run, it can be detrimental, but here in the here and right now, you don't notice so much. And so what happens is that your customers don't have an urgency to take action. They could start taking vitamins today, they could start taking vitamins tomorrow, and so on. And so this is a thing that whenever we do research within as a service designers, we really need to look out for the painkiller problems, because if we don't do that, it often doesn't work really well, or it doesn't lead to the viability of people actually taking action and buying. I myself made this mistake sometimes when I initially built IMMA Collective. Why? Because when I spoke with freelancers, the people who work for themselves, they often, their number one problem is finding clients. And so I knew that's the painkiller problem that people have. That is the problem that I should solve. But as a service designer, what I observed is also that when people don't know who is their client and what is their offer, they really go in many different directions. And so it takes a lot of effort. So I thought, okay, let me help them design their offering and their value proposition. But until I have not combined it to, let's design your offering to enable you to get clients by design, not by chance, and combine that, it wasn't really working. So even if you understand that maybe people need something else, then it's like, not that they not explain right away, but you need to link it potentially to the painkiller problem. And this is even so, I want to give you another concrete example of why this is so relevant of identifying one specific painkiller problem and then also thinking about delivery. If you think of Amazon as an example, Amazon didn't start it as a one-stop shop offering everything and solving all the things. It started just with books. It delivered simple books because they could actually be fit through, no, essentially your post box at home and could be delivered very easily. So again, that's why it is so important to figure out what is the one painkiller problem that you can solve with your service, and that's your focus for designing a new value proposition. So those are the first two lessons, one around combining exploratory research with early testing, the second really focusing on painkiller problems and identifying the biggest painkiller problems that you want to solve, and ignoring vitamin problems at the beginning because you need to make the thing viable and then you can add things later on. And the third lesson that I learned along this way is really specifically around learning business design and combining business design or business language with service design. Why? Because whenever I designed value propositions or these new offerings or ventures, I usually was interacting with C-level within the organization or however, like the CEO or management. And to make your work stand out and more effective, you really need to translate how we speak as service designers into business language. And so when we usually say, we need to make something desirable, usually you need to relate that and connect that to actually this will drive adoption. And the more you make it desirable, or the more you actually also create an experience that people want to talk about and refer other people to, the more this probably drives retention. And the more this reduces cost of acquisition, so CAC. So really think, what is the business metrics that your organization are having? What are the KPIs? And then linking the work that you do as a service designer to those metrics to justify certain decisions and to give you more confidence in the work that you're presenting and why it is relevant to have design in there. And I think this also then, we often as designers say, we'd love to have a seat at the table, but it's our responsibility to really learn how to communicate this in a way that speaks to the decision makers. I'll give you another example because often I think we feel a bit like, specifically when it comes to design decision or direction in which we should go. I was in one situation where we had two different directions and value propositions, but one, I thought that's not as ethical as I thought in terms of, and you might have been in situations that were similar. Maybe this is not the best decision that you could make for a user, that might not be ethical. Yes, it might be a great business decision, but not in the long run. And what I learned is actually saying, it's not about saying, this is might not be that ethical or not, because that puts them in a hard spot. What I often was saying, this direction would present you with some reputational risk. Here it is, what could be the impact in terms of reputation for your company. And that usually really works much better than saying ethical risks. So sometimes I think the concept is the same, but the language that we use is completely different. And so learning how to adapt that language so that we have more influence and that we can basically translate our concepts in business speak and therefore gain a seat at the table. So those are the three kind of main lessons that I took away along my career, and also skills that I wanted to acquire. But I'm curious to now hear your questions or your curiosities around what you would like to know more or learn more from.
Hey, thank you so much, Lily. Really appreciate these three extremely valuable insights, and especially I love the framing of the second one with the painkiller versus vitamins. I feel it's a very clear image there that you're sharing with us. So obviously, people will slowly start to write questions in the chat, and I'm very happy to share already the first question coming from someone who was nearly your name, Layli, who says, "Thank you, Lily. We surely use different tools in service design projects. If your service design toolkit were a backpack, what's one unexpected item you'd always carry?" Oh, that's a very poetic question. Love it.
The very beautiful question. I think I would always have a pen and paper there because I believe that often it is really putting down any idea or visualization on paper. It can be super scrappy, but maybe like I just look at this. I have it on my desk. Usually my morning coffee is really writing down or making visuals of a new ideas when I think. And as a service designer, specifically when we collaborate and deal with other people, being able to put down on paper a simple visual makes the idea concrete. It is a first version of a prototype, and it avoids any misunderstandings because then you can hand over the pen to the other person and say, how this is how I see it. How do you see? How would you change it? So visualizing and creating prototypes that could be easy sketches is an incredibly powerful tool. So yeah, pen and paper for me. I'm curious to
It's a
hear about this.
very important tool. Thank you so much. And I'm sure other people have other suggestions, so don't hesitate to add your
Yeah.
suggestions in the chat of what you would add in your metaphorical backpack. We have another question coming from Emmanuel Frania, who says, I love your talk, Lily. In an always more digitized world through platforms, how can we not lose contact with our clients? Do you have any advices on how maybe you manage that?
Yeah. So I think I really love the approach of continuous discovery by Teresa Torres of like, how do you design something that allows you to constantly be in contact with your customer every week? So for example, in my case with IMMA Collective, I probably have specific discovery calls intentionally. Like I spend 45 minutes with people to figure out if I could help them every week. And by having those conversations, asking them questions about where they would they like to go, how would their dream business look like in a year from now, what is holding them back, what are discoveries, I essentially do discovery calls every week. And then I use the insights and reflections that I get from them to one, create content. So that's really helpful because then sometimes people say like, it feels like reading your newsletter, you're in my head because I really hear the language and it allows me to speak constantly. I know that depending on if you like, this is me being, because I really learned that sales is actually doing service design. The two things are really close together. If you are in an organization that has where decision makers are much more further apart from people who are the clients, then what are again some rituals that you can bring in, or even what are sometimes for us when we did those discovery calls, tiny video snippets. It doesn't need to be long, that we would record at the end with the key question from the customers to bring back those voices of the customer and make them super concrete. So I'm a huge believer of the more I learned actually how to build businesses, I really can see a combination between service design, marketing, and sales. The three things really go hand in hand, and you can combine them so much more than we actually think. I have more ideas on that, but I'm now wanting also to create space for like other questions. But if there is one thing that I can share, I actually have designed a couple of quizzes, and I do design those quizzes for IMMA Collective, but I also have designed them for some of the clients, which is essentially a quiz that then gives you a result. And for me, those quizzes are also a great way to learn about your customer, to combine marketing and again data collection. So to bring those together. And I think we service designer have not really spent so much time understanding how we could better combine exactly service design, marketing, and sales.
Hey, thank you so much. We have a very practical question. As you shared a bit of your morning routine through visualizations and
Yeah.
so, and that it is an essential part of your toolkit, Juliana asks, have you tips for people like me who struggle to do sketches effectively? Any exercises you will advise? Thank you so much for your insights.
Juliana, I think this is a wonderful question because you're asking it to me. I actually found my school I don't know how you call them, but the evaluations from the fourth grade. And my teacher was saying, like, you're not really good at drawing and writing. It's really ugly. Until this day, my writing is not the beautiful thing. I think we often see a lot of people in service design who sketch beautifully and write beautifully. I'm not that person, and that's totally fine. And I think for a long time, and I have a lot of book here, how to draw everything, how to make sketches, and I spend a lot of time doing it. But what I understood is actually, no, it's much more about the idea and the concept, and the explanation. It's not how it looks at all. It can be totally messy, as long as you find ways. For me, what has been probably one of the more powerful ways is not about how I draw, but really tapping into the power of analogies and metaphors. I use a lot of them, like the thing that I used with you today, the painkillers versus vitamin problem, because they stay with you. If you're able to use metaphors and analogies, then people will remember what you said. If you sketch beautifully, they might remember the sketch, but in the end, it's still no, like just the circles and squares. That's it, and you don't need much more.
I always like to remember to remind people that some of the most well-known paintings are the paintings that we see from cavemen, and they're shit. They're
Yeah.
really shit. But these paintings tell so much of a story of what happened back in those days, and they are so valuable for historians and so many people, so that it's not so much about how they drew, it's what they drew. And drawing the analogies maybe is then even more telling, even if it's just boxes and small lines, it makes a lot of a difference. We have
Yes.
a next question, Layli again. We have a few questions of people who are very deep in the question sharing. That's really good. That was a really insightful talk. Thank you so much. I'm curious, Lily, what's a non-design thing you do regularly that secretly makes you a better designer?
Yes. Is essentially what I learned is you really become an incredibly good designer if you teach what you learn. So I actually spend a lot of time either then teaching at university because I had the chance, but sometimes even just creating small short videos of new concepts. And I think when I started at the beginning, I think it is more like you don't come up with new frameworks and concept. I really admired the people within the agency that where I worked that came up with new models and things and was like, I don't know how to do that. But it's at the beginning, it's just like you learn something and then you find a way of how to explain it in a super simple way to others. And you just basically repeat the knowledge, you credit the person you get the information from, and you play it back. And once you do this more and more, you will start seeing that suddenly you start up actually combining things and you start making new models and frameworks. So now I come actually up with models and frameworks, but it took me a few years to go through the process of doing something, learning something, and then teaching it. Or you simply do something and then you write about it. I think I recently helped my brother go from an idea that he had to testing this business ideas in 3 days. And we just simply did it. But what I then did is essentially writing it down. So you make everything that you did explicit. And that's what actually teaching is about. You need to simplify it. You need to make that implicit and tacit knowledge explicit. And that actually then makes you a better designer.
Thank you so much. We are already at the three questions, but we still have some tiny time, so let's try to do another one. Juliana comes back with another question, which is: have you ever encountered resistance from business stakeholders when proposing service design interventions? How do you deal with that?
Yes, of course. And specifically, I think where I would say the biggest resistance was when I moved from London, where service design is well known, to Verona, Italy, where nobody knows service design. And I think the biggest tip for me first there was essentially not talking about service design. If people don't know it and don't understand the value, I just simply help people test new ideas and make sure that they de-risk them. So I would, when entrepreneurs or innovation managers came to me, they said, we would like to build this new service. We would like to build this new idea. And was like saying, okay, let's do this. Instead of building it and then it might flop, not flop, and you have spent thousands of euros or Swiss francs into making something happen that then doesn't give you any return of investment. Let's figure out how to design small prototypes to de-risk this experiment and test it out. And I simply really talk about what is the outcome that I like to help them achieve. So I help them to de-risk some things. I help them to make sure that they are not wasting time and money in something that doesn't work. I help them that the innovation manager who hires me doesn't lose face and is blamed for investing and building something that ends up not working out. And sometimes it's if we figure out in 2-3 months that it's not worth investing, then that's actually a big success. And so I think for me, the resistance that I could that it depends always, of course, which resistance. But for me, the resistance has been, I don't know about service design and why does this matter? And so for me here, how do you overcome is really talking about what is the desired outcome. I always think about it's about selling the holiday, not the trip. How does it feel to be on the beach, making sure that you have tested an idea before you have spend a lot of money, that you know that this works, rather than these are the 3 steps and this is the process and this is the methodology. Nobody cares around how you get there. The importance is that you get, and I can be lying on the beach happily, sipping a cocktail.
You're really the master of analogies. Sell the holiday, not the trip. That's one that will stay in the books. Hey, thank you so much, Lily, for all what you shared with us. We are slowly coming to a close, and obviously, there is a lot of thank you messages for you. Just gonna show you one or two of them as we arrive to the end. It's been a really inspiring moment. Thank you so much for sharing all of what you shared with us. I have a last note that I'd like to share, which is if you're someone who is interested in exploring solo entrepreneurship and you might not know yet if this is something for you, Lily has a wonderful quiz on her website, IMMA Collective, that you can try out to see if you're ready or not. And if you're ready, obviously, she has plenty of resources, a community around that. But also, if you're not ready, it's also a good sign that maybe there is a few other things that you can learn that where you can prepare yourself. So check her website. I think it's definitely a very powerful resources for people interested in maybe going in the freelance route, launching a one person business, or just being interested also in business in general. But for me, on my side, a big thank you, Lily, for all your insights. I thank you to all the people who shared their questions in the chat and who were present. It was really a lovely moment that we were able to share together. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody for taking the time to listen in and tune in. And the question.
Especially on a Saturday.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely time. Cheers.
Bye.